Hey everyone, it's your friend Dan, and 613 Creatives is back. Thanks for joining us today. After a little hiatus, we're back at it. If you are an actor or a filmmaker in Eastern Ontario, you will definitely want to subscribe and share this podcast with your fellow filmmakers. We're getting to know and connecting the movie-making talent of the region. Please check out our other episodes and let me know what kind of stories you'd like to hear and which ones you have to tell. So I've got a very special guest today. He has had a career as a producer that has spanned decades. He's founded a production company here in Canada and one in the UK. He's produced nearly a dozen feature films. One of those films was Croatia's Oscar pick for 2025. And another was considered as Hungary's nomination for an Oscar in 2013. He's also a distribution consultant, mentor, and screenwriter. He has represented Canada and UK productions at markets around the world, including Cannes. He has partnered on creative, focused endeavors with high-ranking institutions in South Africa, London, and Berlin. And if you're curious, as I know many of you are, about effective theatrical and festival release strategies, you'll want to hear what this guy has to say. Join me in welcoming to the show Michael A. Dobbin. Hi, Michael. How you doing?
Fabulous. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you very much for being on the show. As I've mentioned before, my main audience base is really going to want to hear some of the things that you have to say that
I'll
comes
try to make it good
from
then,
your
yeah.
background, your expertise. Now, my first question is, clearly you love making movies, and I like to ask this. I like to get to know this sort of fact from just about everybody. Where did your love of cinema begin?
Well, it's a great question, one every filmmaker should have an answer for. I guess in my career now, sometimes I like making movies, sometimes they're a struggle. But I'm not the only one there. But I think, it was really since childhood. Everyone remembers that feeling of seeing a film that they'd been waiting to see or excited about seeing. I think, I'm of a generation, obviously, where going to the cinema was a much bigger part of life than it is now. And, Blockbuster meant something when you would sort of wait for the release date, and then you'd go and try to queue up and get into the cinema when it was, when it was showing.
Yeah.
That still happens to an extent.
Hmm.
Festivals kind of give a bit of that buzz, but it has evolved, it has changed, and it's not necessarily a bad thing. But yeah, just always kind of loved storytelling, and I think in more recent years, I've sort of had much more of a stronger desire to tell stories, Canadian stories, and stories from other parts of the world. Um, you can probably see from my film credits, I've kind of veered away from kind of Americana and Hollywood fare to more of I guess in North America, you call it more art house cinema,
Okay.
which isn't always the case. We have some more commercial projects, but yeah, life changes, right? And we follow our trajectories, and here I am.
Fantastic. How I'd heard about you initially was from a film colleague of mine, and he was telling me about how you really knew the ins and outs of the world of production and distribution. How did you get into the world of production and distribution?
Well, it's been a journey. The simplest answer is when I was, I think it was around 10 or 11, I started making movies on, video cameras and creating my
Same here.
changing epic blockbusters that no one will ever see. I then went to what was then called Ryerson University for the film program. And then it's now called Toronto Metropolitan U. Um, and I went to school there, and kind of right out of and even crossing over with my studies there, I was starting to work in the film business as a sort of a cog in the machine as a production assistant. I ended up working in the accounting office on quite a few very large American films.
Oh
So I
wow.
saw where the money was being spent. Did a bit of assistant directing,
Mhm.
that kind of stuff. And then there came a time where I sort of had to decide whether I wanted to, join a union and go for sort of the more blue collar route on film production, working on sets and that kind of thing. But I always wanted to be telling stories. I wanted to be in that on that side of things. So I had to kind of make a clean break and decided to I'm going to go and get away from the big machine of the Toronto Hollywood North thing, which can really pull you in. So I went kind of as far away as I could at that time, which was the UK, and started working over there and had some really excellent positions and get mentorship and that kind of thing. And started. So my first feature actually was produced in the UK, shot in London. It was a low budget horror movie, which Lionsgate ended up releasing, which is kind of a coup.
Oh, wow.
Um,
Which one was that?
and that in North America, it was released under the title The Devil's Curse, but the original title was Credo.
Okay.
And the devil's not in the movie at all, but that was for that particular title.
Okay.
So yeah, from that point on, I I found that I ended up producing that film because I was asked by some colleagues that I'd met on sort of a screen training workshop because I had for a time was doing producing screen training workshops for professional screenwriters and directors and that kind of thing through an organization that was sort of given funding to do so. So
Okay.
I sort of said yes, and I had done some of my own short films at that point, some which won awards and things, but they were short films and had fun doing them. But I didn't sort of see that as my end goal. So when I started doing that particular film, that was kind of a really neat experience because it was all filmed in central London in an abandoned, not abandoned, but a decommissioned fire hall
Oh, wow.
Baker Street.
On
Um,
Baker Street.
we had run of the place, and so we built a little mini studio in there and shot a lot of it there.
Wow.
Uh, it was a really really fun experience. That fire hall is now one of the poshest hotels in London, called the Chiltern Fire Hall.
Okay. Wow.
I don't think I'll ever be going back there, but anyway, I saw it. It was an interesting time. Then I ended up coming back to Canada. I wanted to start my own company and kind of pursue developing original content. And again, my skills that were then developing as a producer were kind of being sought. Um, I had a mentorship under Leslie Unwin, who was a producer in the UK, who I think she was the first woman to win a BAFTA for a film called East is East,
Oh,
just going
wow.
back.
It's amazing.
So she and I, she's now doing some pretty amazing things with won a Peabody Award for some documentary work she's been doing in India and that kind of thing. But
Fantastic.
uh, anyway, that was sort of that. I think she was one who really kind of said. I remember saying to her, I'm really thinking, maybe I should start my own company back in Canada. She's like, oh, you should absolutely do that. Why not? Um, Maybe she wanted to get rid of me. I don't know. So yeah, I started Quiet Revolution Pictures, and that company, our first feature film was a co-production called The Maiden Dance to Death, which was filmed partly in Ottawa,
Oh, really?
filmed
Oh,
in
wow.
Montreal, Budapest, and Ljubljana, which is in Slovenia, and it was filmed by Oscar-winning cinematographer Vilmos Zsigmond, the late great, who some film buffs will know shot Close Encounters of the Third Kind,
Oh, wow.
things like The Deer Hunter. Worked with Robert Altman, Woody Allen.
That-
I think he turned 80, I think, the year he was in Ottawa filming, and he loved Ottawa. It was great. It
Oh,
was like
wow.
working with a teenager. You'd bring him a espresso around 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and he would have more energy than anybody else. Yeah,
Wow.
so that was our first feature, and I think we had something like 17 different financial partners and three
Mm.
co-producer, two, three co-producers, three of us. Yeah, and it was a real kind of baptism by fire, that one. And that film it was interesting. It played in something like 30 countries and
Oh,
no,
wow.
30 festivals in 20 countries. And only yesterday, the 35 millimeter print I had of the film, I donated to the National Archives.
Oh,
Just
wow.
no
Holy.
one's going to watch it on that anymore. But that parting with that box was sort of sweet. It had stamps from every country in the world. It was quite
Oh, that's,
interesting. You
oh,
don't get that from a digital file, do you?
yeah.
Um, yeah, so I produced that film and then did other films since that. I mean, I did one called still one of my favorites, Eddie the Sleepwalking Cannibal, which was
That sounds interesting.
set in a fictional town in Eastern Ontario and Western Quebec, kind of a made up place, and great cast. That film premiered at the Tribeca Film Festival in New York and
No
played at
way.
Karlovy Vary and Edinburgh and I don't even remember. Montreal premiered in Fantasia in Montreal.
Oh, really?
So that was a fun film to do.
Yeah.
So, from that, it then grew into other collaborations, other co-productions. My company's now doing some series development,
Mhm.
documentary. We have a few features in the pipeline. I also have a company in the UK called Peardrop Productions, which is it develops original content and does service production in the UK as well. I don't know if that answers your question. How did I
Hmm. It
sort of
does.
end
Yeah.
up? There's a lot of
Just,
things the universe threw at me that I maybe had the courage or folly, stupidity to say yes to. Maybe.
well, that's how we all get to where we ultimately,
Don't be afraid to say yes, but also don't be
yeah,
afraid to say no.
that's right.
That's
Everything's good in moderation. Uh,
absolutely
I believe the filmmaker that you'd mentioned that had worked on Close Encounters. I believe our mutual colleague Kevin Reeves. I believe he mentioned that to me. That was one of
okay.
our top
Yes.
points of conversation. He's like, "Oh, he's worked with this guy," and da 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 da.
Well,
And
Kevin himself, he's worked with some pretty amazing people as well. So
yes, he
I love,
has.
prying stories out of him because he's been around a long time. And
Yeah, right from his time as an extra on Adventures of Babysitting to working with Pierce Brosnan and Richard Attenborough. Yeah,
true.
he's always had one foot in the pond the entire time. That's an amazing timeline. Very inspiring. You're the founding director of Quiet Revolution Pictures, Teardrop Productions. I'd like to know some more about some of the films that you've produced through those companies. Some of the ones that you mentioned to me were Mitch Jenkins' Sci-Fi: A Million Days, which I saw the trailer for, which looks amazing. Um, correct me if I'm pronouncing this correct. Bernhard Poocher?
Yeah,
Yeah,
Bernard Poocher.
Bernhard
Yeah,
Poocher's Ravers. Is that right?
Ravers. Yeah.
Ravers in 2020. Ivona Juka's Beautiful Evening, Beautiful Day. And you executive produced Stephen Michael Hayes' Jill in 2022. And you had an early career success that came in the form of Andre Houle's The Maiden Dance to Death. You mentioned that earlier. It's presented in 20 countries and 30 international film festivals. Like I said, amazing timeline. Can you summarize like what went into getting these made, and what advice would you have for someone who wanted to take on being a producer for stuff like this?
That's a really good question. So every project is entirely different, and
Mm-hmm.
um, there's different. Essentially, there's three different types of production. Really, there's um, service production, which in the Ottawa, the Eastern Ontario region, a lot of the work that comes in is service production, meaning the IP or the intellectual property is owned by someone else, usually, a studio or
Mm-hmm.
whatever, and they come and they want to film here. So they'll hire a local producer, local crew to kind of put together the filming, essentially. So it's
Like all
purely
our
limited.
Hallmark movies.
Yeah, yeah. So those would be service productions, right? So
Mm-hmm.
so Hallmark comes in with the IP and takes away the footage and makes it into a movie and distributes and all that. So the second kind of production would be original content development and production. So that's when, you as a filmmaker, producer, you acquire the rights to something or you create those rights and then give them to your company. There's just sort of a whole legal side of it that's important to know. Um, and then you develop that, you get it, the script's written and polished, and hire the actors, directors, all that kind of stuff, and then you make the film, and then you license the film to a distributor or sell it. Sometimes you're involved in the distribution, sometimes you hand it over to a distributor. And that's original production, and then there's co-production, which is probably less known by sort of the general filmmaking world, but essentially it means you're collaborating with other producers. And
Okay.
that's something that my company's done a lot of. Canada has something like 55 or 56 treaties, international treaties with countries around the world. The US is not one of them, just to be clear, but it means that under the international treaty, two countries can agree to make a film national cinema of both countries.
Okay.
So, and it's a bit of a nerdy thing, but the reason that's important is it means as a national film, you qualify for subsidies, film funds, tax credits, all those kinds of things.
Oh, I see.
So what it means is producers can pool resources to make films. So it may be too expensive to make a particular film just in one country. Bring in another partner, sometimes two, sometimes three. Partners can pool their resources together and make the film. There's always a lead producer, the one who has usually developed the content, and then they end up collaborating with these other producers. And it's it sounds very complicated, and it kind of is, but the principle is very simple. It's just that you're pooling resources to make a film and pooling your creative energy. So every producer, it's not just about getting the financing out of your country. You're expected to make a meaningful creative contribution. It's
Right.
sort of one
Of course.
requirement. And what that is really depends. So on Ivona Yuka's film, we were essentially we did the post-production. So most of the creative, in fact, all of this, the script was developed in Croatia. The director is from there. It was mostly filmed there. So yeah, that we were what we call a minority co-producer, which means we had the sort of a smaller piece of the puzzle, but our contributions were on the post-production side
Oh,
of
I
it.
see. Okay.
Now, because that particular film was qualified under a treaty, it means that it was both a Canadian film and a Croatian film, and in fact, a Cypriot film and a Bosnian film, I think, as well. So
Oh, wow.
there
A lot
was
of
a Polish
cooperation.
co-producer as well. That's why this film we participated in as a Canadian producer was is a Croatian film, and Croatia had picked it for their Oscar submission this year. So that's how we kind of ended up in that scenario. We didn't get nominated, but it was nice to be, you know, on the ladder briefly.
Right.
It's a beautiful film. So interestingly, there's no set job description for what a producer does, and it really
Mm,
depends on how big the company is. I mean, one producer can produce a film and they kind of do a lot of everything. Um, Being a producer includes some of the creative development usually,
hmm
creative input. You're involved in the script development, the casting, finding the director, all of that kind of stuff. But a lot of it is business affairs, which is again sort of a boring sounding area, but it has to do with legal, copyright, um, budgets, financing plans, calculating tax credits, putting in fund applications. It's really kind of dry stuff, but it's necessary, right?
hmm
So sometimes in production teams or producing teams, you may have one producer that focuses purely on the creative, and you may have one that focuses purely on the legal, and someone just on the numbers. Smaller independent producers tend to do everything.
Right. Yeah. Wear a lot
I
of
find
hats.
certainly at the end of the day, the left side of my brain and the right side of my brain are both exhausted because I'm very heavily involved in the creative as well as the
hmm
financing and business affairs side. So, how would you sort of get into that? I mean, a lot of producing really is confidence, like feeling that you know what you're able to take on the challenges, but there really is a skill set that you can learn. There's no particular, like I said, there's no job description. There's no that I'm aware of sort of producing school. There may be a few film schools that offer kind of some of those skills. A lot of it's going to come from experience. So, you know, the skills that if you are interested in becoming a producer, you know, definitely being good at math helps. Um, Understanding some basic legal stuff. You don't have to be a lawyer, but you need to understand how copyright works. And everything from, optioning a story to music licensing and getting clearances for you want to have a, product in your film, someone's drinking a particular type of beer or pop and, you need to get clearance to use
Yeah.
those things. So there's a lot of that stuff you kind of have to learn. Definitely, getting a mentor, someone who's willing to kind of help you out. And again, the best way to learn is to do it. So if you can,
Hmm.
um, get onto a production as an assistant, and you can see what's going on behind scenes,
Yeah.
or you could, if you're doing your own production, maybe ask a producer to help you on a few things and don't be afraid to ask questions.
Hmm.
It's definitely a very specialized area. I mean, the other thing about producing that I think a lot of people don't appreciate is you're taking on a lot of risk personally,
Yeah.
every time you take on a project because you're taking on financial and legal risk.
Hmm.
You're often not going to be paid until the end of the production, or if things go well. So
Hmm.
it's I think a lot of people don't kind of recognize the stress that can be involved in being a producer. It's not about smoking cigars on your yacht in Cannes and counting your money. I mean, and maybe there are producers out there that get to do that, but certainly on the independent side, it's definitely a very long, challenging road. Working with all kinds of personalities, people that I think on people that have the confidence to bring their story to the screen also maybe sometimes are very difficult to work with. So being able to kind of um, navigate and communicate with different partners, that's communication's a
Hmm.
huge advantage. And to be a good communicator, the ability to not overreact when things go wrong, the ability to not immediately resort to pointing a finger at someone when something goes wrong,
Right.
all those sorts of things. Again, how do you learn that? I don't know. You just sort of learn it from being around it.
Right.
Um,
Well, I'm no good at math, so I mean that the
you're
producer
lucky that
role is
you're
probably
lucky.
like not for me. But you certainly filled in the gaps for I know, like I said, my audience base primarily. I mean, really strong, talented, creative focused types that I'm sure they don't kind of think about the business side that much, and that's kind of where probably a bit of the knowledge gap is, and you're filling in a lot of it. So,
But
so
it
that's
certainly
great.
helps to know. And I mean, just to remind people too, of the life cycle of a film, let's say this is 5 years,
Hmm.
production is this little section, right?
Yeah.
So it's definitely a long game if you want to be a producer. So that's why, as a producer as well, you never just have one project. You always have to have many projects because you need all those
You
little
got to do
things
a
to
little juggling act. Yeah.
exactly.
Now, speaking of, but there's something else that we really do need to talk about, and that's that banner behind you,
Oh yeah.
in which is all about Just Watch Me TV, which you are the founder of. Just Watch Me TV, if people aren't aware, some of you aren't aware, is Canada's own hybrid streaming service which showcases indie and international films at home here in Canada and around the world. You got to tell us more about Just Watch Me TV. How tell us about it and how did it come about?
So this is a question. It's a fair question to ask is what exactly, why another streaming service? I mean, I think the analogy we like to use is let's say that big streamers are like a fast food restaurant and you know what you're going
Mm-hmm.
to get before you even walk in and you walk out feeling the same way every time. We're the food truck parked across the street with daily specials and local ingredients. That's
Mm-hmm.
sort of,
The best poutine around.
there you go. Yeah. So yeah, a lot of the films that you'll find on our service, films and series and documentaries, they're uh, almost all independently produced. We have some studio films, but it's mostly independent film. A lot of foreign language film from other countries.
Ah,
We have a lot of Canadian. We're actually building out the Canadian side significantly. You'll see some changes in the next few months there.
right.
Uh, we stream all over the world, so there are some Canadian streaming services that are limited to Canada. We go out to the world, and there's some really interesting kind of hybrid stuff that we're doing. So the most notable, well, I'll sort of start by saying that, where do you watch it? Well, the domain name, that's it. Just
Mm-hmm.
watchme.tv. That in your browser, that's the service. But it's also available on mobile phones, smart TVs. You can get an app for your smart TV.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, it's free to watch with ads, or you can subscribe for a whopping $4.99 a month,
Oh, wow.
which is
That's
really
fantastic.
not. We want to keep the price as sort of an add-on price, right?
Right.
'Cause, we realize people still may be watching their Disney's and Netflix, and that's fine with us. But when you want something different, this is where you come.
Hmm.
One of the very cool features that we're bringing on, what's available now, is pop-up cinema.
Oh,
So
so that,
what that means is if there's a title on our service that has a little pop-up cinema logo, you can actually, as an exhibitor, when I say exhibitor, you could be a bricks and mortar movie theater. You could be a film appreciation society, your local library. You could
okay.
just be Dan in Perth who wants to do a screening,
Okay.
of a new movie or an old movie. You can get a license to show a film and charge admissions. So there's sort of a we
Oh, interesting.
and there's sort of a self-serve option, or you can be in touch with us and we can negotiate. For example, if you're a nonprofit and you want to do a fundraiser or something. So, but yeah, you can get a legal license to show the film, and then we're partnering with a company called Artini, which is a company out of Europe that essentially you get this free app, third-party app. You put it on your laptop or whatever, and then we can send you an encrypted screener right to your laptop that you can plug into your projector and play.
Oh, wow.
Once the license is used, it deletes off your system. And there's all kinds of encryption and stuff like that that you as
Right.
the end user never even have to worry about. But it means is that you can actually, as an exhibitor, you could make money doing it.
Mm-hmm.
You pay the license fee, so the filmmaker gets their piece of it, and then you can take the rest from ticket sales.
And
It's
would
really
the
cool. So,
filmmaker, sorry, and
go
the
ahead.
filmmaker, the exhibitor, would they set their own ticket prices?
Yeah, exactly. So
Right.
normally in any of these situations, again, there's sort of a self-serve option where you put in that you register as a user and your information is put in about like how many seats you're going to show to and that kind of thing, and then the
Okay.
price is calculated. But yeah, you can set kind of whatever ticket price you want. I mean, obviously, if you charge too much, people won't come.
Right.
Too little, you won't, you might just break even, but
Mm.
it's sort of up to you how you would do it. But yeah, that the screening fee could be anything from, $75 to 300 if it's a new movie, if you were showing it for, say 50 or 100 people. But again, if you do the math, if you charge, $15 for a ticket,
Mm.
yeah, you can make a bit of money. And
Wow.
everybody likes this because especially for old movies, that's one thing. It's just very easy to get them and
Mm.
access them and play them. Where it gets interesting is when we have new movies. So if there isn't a cinema in your city that's showing a new release, in some cases you can get access to that new release and show it and become the exhibitor.
Oh, really? Oh,
Yeah.
wow. Hmm.
So there's some
Interesting.
pretty
At a
neat
theater.
stuff that can happen. And we're kind of making it available because we want people to be able to, I guess the term's like democratizing cinema. People can actually take on some of that risk and some of that programming themselves, which
That's
is really
that's amazing because I know, like I mentioned earlier, I'm based just outside of Perth, and like if we want to see a movie, we have to drive to the city.
Mhm.
Perth no longer has its own theater. It hasn't had one in quite some time. Carlton Place had one up until a few years ago, I think. Anyway, the Studio Theater Perth, who I've done some work for a number of times, they show independent type stuff every now and then to sort of fill that gap from
Mhm.
the community theater. Um, yeah, I have fairly close ties with the people at the studio theater. I think perhaps it might be worth mentioning to them
Absolutely. Yeah.
Just watch me TV. It might be a service that could really could be really popular in a place like Perth for sure. And I know, without a doubt, I mean, you're speaking the language of my knowledge base, of my followers. I think after this podcast airs, you're going to be getting a lot of inquiries as to, hey, can you show my feature? I'm gonna get my feature shown on Just Watch Me TV. Do you show? What's the sort of the criteria? Does it have to be a certain length, or shorts a thing that could possibly take advantage of that service?
That's a
Or
good question. So we're not programming short films at the moment.
okay,
That may change, but part of it is, we don't really have the capacity to go
right.
through the vast number of submissions
Hmm.
um, that we get. So we are mostly focused on features and
Right.
documentaries and series. Uh, but again, that may change in future. As far as what the criteria would be for submission, I mean, we have licensed individual projects directly from producers. We often go through distributors. There's no particular criteria, but
Okay.
I think if you have a look at the site, you can kind of see the kinds of things that are
Hmm.
on there. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that we're limited to that, but um, the categories are quite descriptive as well. You'll sort of see that we're not just saying it's comedy and horror. It's like we have
Hmm.
sort of quirky names for them to kind of drill down a bit more and make it more interesting and engaging.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'd encourage, anyone that is interested in, approaching us as a platform, take a look at the platform first, have a look and even consider subscribing. That $5 is less than a coffee, but it definitely helps us build our offering.
Mm-hmm.
One thing that is interesting as well is it's getting into the realm of nerdiness, but we're on the CAVCO list of online services, which means that uh, if we license a film, it qualifies for tax credits, for example.
Oh,
And in some sort of funding scenarios, we can come in and help with we used to become a production partner in some cases on sort of higher profile projects. Not necessarily the indie level, but sort of on bigger projects, we're able to sort of leverage uh, the ecosystem in Canada a little bit to help projects get off the ground.
yeah, that's fantastic. When this airs, you're going to make people very excited. Ones
I
that I
hope
know
so.
personally. Um, Now I've got to ask. I'm curious. The "Just Watch Me" does that come from the Pierre Elliott Trudeau quote?
Good
Or
question. So it's not meant to be political specifically.
yeah,
The
yeah.
the the story behind the brand is that I think it was probably around I think it was around 2005 when I was in the UK.
Hmm.
A friend and I had put together a short film program
Right.
that we did with the support of the Canadian High Commission and BAFTA, the British Academy, and we did a night called Just Watch Me, Shorts That Aren't Pants. It was Canadian Canadian short films.
Cool.
Good stuff from TIFF and award winners and NFB classic shorts, and it was a great little program. And the reason we called it Just Watch Me was it was more of this sort of Canadians abroad understand that the reference is Canadian.
Hmm.
They, and it had this double entendre about being well, just watch the film. Yeah, of course,
Yeah,
Um,
love it.
so so that's sort of where that originated. We stuck with it. I mean, it's definitely, again, it remains for Canadians and other parts of the world. They're like, oh yeah, that's a reference.
That's the
Um,
tie back to Canada.
yeah, but where there's no sort of a political
Yeah, of course.
and
Hmm.
it just seems to fit the brand. But yeah, we've been using it for quite some time.
Yeah, well, that's fantastic. I have a million days queued up, and
Oh yeah,
we'll be
yeah.
watching that.
Oh good.
The trailer had me hooked. I was just like, and I'm, as you can tell, huge nerd. Love sci-fi in
Like
all its
me. Yeah.
forms. So I'm very much looking forward to that. Speaking of which, That is among your many other works. You co-wrote A Million Days. It seems to have some really intensely thought-provoking subject matter. So for other inspiring screenwriters out there, tell us a bit about your writing process. What made you feel like this particular production or productions like that? What made it stand out?
Well, that particular project I initially came on as a producer, and we at one point in the development process, we ended up getting a new director that came on, and he had ideas about how he wanted to approach the script. So kind of by default, again, I often sort of fall into this, but I ended up doing the draft with him,
Oh, okay.
and subsequently did more drafts and more drafts because the relationship was working well that way. So I certainly didn't intend to be one of the screenwriters on that, but that was sort of how it played out, and the same reasons that attracted me as a producer as a writer. I mean, it was just it's very interesting. I don't want to give too much of the film away, but it's set
Hmm.
in this sort of post AI future where AI has is a fact and has to be controlled. Don't want to give too much away, but we filmed this a couple of years ago, and as we were filming it, some of these ideas of fancy were actually coming out in the news. I'd be on my way to the studio and reading a story that, oh, they've just actually done this thing we pretended would be in 30 years from now, and it's just happened. So
Art
it,
imitates life.
yeah, it was very freaky in that way. Um, but as a screenwriter, I'm attached to quite a few projects. Some are mine, and some I've been brought on to write. And there's some series that I'm working on, mostly in comedy. Um, I personally really enjoy comedy and satire. So far, I mean, A Million Days is not that. It's not really a fun. I hope it's not. If you're laughing, maybe we didn't do our job well. Uh, um, yeah, I seem to be doing more comedy these days than anything else, and I don't
Yeah,
know why that is. I like to laugh, I guess. Who
of
doesn't?
course. Who doesn't? Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, are you a fan of sci-fi yourself? Like, was it a enjoyable
Very much
process?
so.
Yeah.
Yeah. And this particular film, I mean, the reviews were very mixed. We
Okay.
found that the people that didn't like the film wanted aliens blowing up
Right.
and laser
Yeah.
beam, that kind of stuff. This is not that film. This is a very cerebral,
Hmm.
philosophical film about where we're going.
Right.
The people that are really hardcore sci-fi fans really seem to like it because it's not hiding behind action sequences. There's a little bit in there, but it's
Hmm.
definitely more about the story and the reveal.
Hmm.
Um, and there's many layers to it. So yeah, I encourage you to watch it for sure. Yeah, I do appreciate your T-shirt there. That is,
Oh, yes. Thank you. I wore this
yeah,
on my. We'll fix it in post.
yeah.
If people look back in previous episodes, you'll see that I try to wear some different eclectic nerdy shirt, which of many of which I have many. But yeah, I wore this on set on my last short, and my sound guy's like, "I hate that phrase. Just get it right the first time." But I mean,
Well,
you
as a
can't
producer,
always
I
get it
can
right the first
tell you
time.
if a director tries to sell me, oh, we'll fix it in post. I'm
Mm.
like, I know how much it's going to cost to fix that in post. Like,
Yeah, yeah, you're the one reminding him. Like, maybe you might want to get that done now.
like we're all here. Let's just do one more.
Just one more take. My last question for you is, you know, like I mentioned, my main audience base are indie filmmakers, and for the average indie filmmaker, what would you say that they should know about the market that we're in now, and the different ways that you can get your work seen, and what's the best way to get that accomplished?
Well, I think the cardinal rule is the market doesn't come to you.
Right.
So, although you can create some really amazing stuff in your own backyard and where you live. And when you have your film, if you want to get it seen, you invariably have to take it to that market, whatever that market is. And a good shorthand is obviously film festivals. Apply to film festivals. If you get invited, go to the
Hmm.
festival. I mean, obviously, there's some festivals that are very small and very, you're not necessarily gonna travel all that way. But if it's a bigger festival in particular, like you should definitely find a way to go because that's where you meet people and that's where you can interact and
Hmm.
sound out ideas for your next project and that kind of thing. So, it's the same way I think when we were all in the pandemic and we're all on Zoom doing whatever it is we do, and then going back to a festival or going to a conference or meeting with people in person, you know what that's like. You actually get things done and make those connections that you can't do from a Zoom call or social media. So that's the one piece of advice I say is go to the market. And in this region, the Toronto Film Festival is a huge festival, one of the biggest in the world.
Hmm.
It's not to say you can just show up in Toronto and go, "Hey guys, I'm here." Like
Hmm.
market, like you've got to do some legwork. But if you actually register for the festival, your name shows up as a participant. You then have access to see who else is going. You can try to get meetings with the people. Maybe there's somebody who's produced a film that is like your film and you think that they might be a good fit for this particular film, or a distributor that shows releases films like yours. You can look them up, you can get access to them, and no one's going to hand that to you. You've got to do the legwork.
Hmm.
Even in Montreal, if you're sci-fi and horror, the Fantasia Film Festival happens. They have a co-production market in Fantasia, which is really not far away for anyone to go.
Wow.
Um, there are bigger markets. Berlin and Cannes are huge. They're overwhelming. But someday go if you can. You can register. It's gonna cost a bit, but I mean, this is your career. You're willing to pay for, a crew and camera equipment. Why not pay for that investment in your career? And if you
Hmm.
go to Cannes once and you go to the film market, we all see the red carpet and the movies that are playing, but behind that is the market. And there are thousands and thousands of movies. And when you walk the halls at all these booths, it's like a trade show, movies from all over the world, and you think, wow, no one's ever going to see that in Canada, or that like most of them will never be seen here. And it's a very humbling experience because you realize, well, my film is also never going to be seen in that market potentially. So that not to be depressing, but that may help you find your angle or find your, sort of sober up and realize, what maybe you want to do to kind of up your game a bit. I don't know. And that only comes from talking to people and meeting people that get excited about your work. And sometimes, maybe your film, you had something much different in mind. It turned out the way it turned out. You're happy with it. It could have been better. But if you meet someone who gets it, they're going to help you push to the next level, right? Through conversation,
Okay.
through engagement, through that kind of thing. The same way that, the indie filmmaking scene in Ottawa and this, Eastern Ontario is very strong. People come together to give each other feedback, to encourage each other, to, you're already doing that when you go to those things. That just remember that there's also the market, the people that are willing to that don't know you, that are going to give you a different answer or tell you, your film's a great idea, but three movies came out last year just like that flopped. And then that's going to be hard for you to say, oh, okay, the market doesn't want this right now.
Hmm.
Good thing I have three others. It very much that's going to be a huge part of it. But also you may find there are people that have projects ready to go and they're looking for someone like you to come in, step in and into the driver's seat and take it on as a director, for example, that kind of thing. So all of these things, I'm just encouraging you to go to the market wherever that is. Um, but there's a lot of it happening in our own backyard. So don't be afraid to go.
Everything that you've had to say today, I found genuinely inspired. Honestly, I'm a filmmaker, like I said, to the core, such as yourself, and I have no doubt that those who are going to see this are, they're going to feel the same. So,
I appreciate that. Thank you.
yeah, thank you so much, Michael, for being on the show and filling us in, lending us your wisdom. This has been a fantastic talk. I'm so glad. We got a chance. I've been waiting to talk to you forever, so I'm so glad we finally had the chance to do so.
Me too. I appreciate it.
Yeah, that's it, everyone. Thanks again to Michael for being on the show today. I have no doubt that you've found some inspiration in this talk. 613 Creatives, we're back after a little bit of a hiatus, but we're back in a big way, and stay tuned for more content. We will see you in the future.